In this second part of independent writing for emergent learners, I'm going to show you some examples of what we're expecting to see for independent writing at this stage, because that really helps to understand what we're looking for, and it will kind of get your mind around the steps in development before we see something that looks more like writing to us. So once again, I'll be using a few examples from this book, and the research is all found in this book if anyone would like to know more about this. The early stages of writing for every individual looks like some form of scribbling, and I'm going to hopefully open your mind about types of scribbling here with respect to writing tools. So in a typical child, when they're first learning about writing, it often is accompanied by drawing, and your scribbling might look a lot like just, scribbles. And then what you would do is say to the child, tell me about what you wrote. And so you're going to introduce the terminology to do with writing and say, this is your writing, tell me what it's about. And then often you would write down or document what they said about this. And further along on the writing development, you might start to see squiggles that go from left to right and eventually from top to bottom, which is great. It doesn't look like anything much, but the fact that they're understanding the convention of left to right and or of top to bottom is huge. It tells us they've been paying attention to text when you're reading, and or they've been paying attention to the way that you write, which is a big part of how we're going to support this. Eventually you might see things that look more like shapes or letters, or they might not look like letters, but they might tell you this is a letter, and then you will support that, encourage that, and document what they said about it. Once they get more into making letters, you're going to see strings of letters, and they might tell you that it means something, and they might be in some kind of order, or they might be just a string of letters, which is a form of scribbling. A random mix of magnetic letters or any kind of letter tiles is a form of scribbling. A string of letters from alphabet sets or from typewriter or computer or text message, all of those kinds of strings of letters are forms of scribbling. So your role as the support person is always going to be to encourage any kind of writing, and not to say, oh, that's not right, let me show you how it goes. There will be a chance in the process for you to model what writing looks like, but you're not doing it in such a way as to correct the student, because these stages really help the teacher to know how to provide feedback to move the student to the next stage. This is an example of scribbling, and you can see in the caption the intended meaning is the student wrote about a big snake. So this could be interpreted as a drawing, but what you want to not do is say, oh, that's not writing, that's a drawing. You want to say, I like your writing. I can tell you wrote about a snake. Can you tell me more? That kind of thing. Feedback we'd provide also might point out the part in the picture that kind of looks like an S. So we would provide that kind of feedback to build on their knowledge of letter shapes. So what do you do if the student cannot tell you about their writing? It could be that they're just not feeling like telling you, or it could be that they can't speak or don't have a great means of communication, and they're doing some kind of writing and you can't tell me what it's about. That's when it becomes important for us to provide some kind of context. And so here's a quick example. Let's say I asked the student to do some writing, and I was showing him my writing, and I said, you do your writing, and the student just traced his hand and said, I'm done, or indicated I'm finished my writing. You still don't correct that. You say, I like your writing. Can you tell me more? And they may say, forget it, or they may write some more scribbles. Whatever they do, let's say they put some scribbles over here, then you praise that as well and say, thanks for writing more. That really helps me to see what you're writing about, for example. What we can do then is build on that, but the feedback that I'd like for context might be something to do with what you were doing at the time. So one thing I will do as the weeks go by is provide writing prompts so that you can show me what writing went with that, and then we can try to interpret something. We just attribute meaning to it so that they can learn something about what writing looks like. This is an example of a more developed stage of emergent writing. You can see here this student has found a way to create shapes that look a little bit more like letters, and very important to note that this student is showing understanding of writing being these characters strung together in a horizontal line. And we would want to document, did they, when we watch them write, did they write from left to right or right to left? It doesn't matter which way, but that just helps us to see what stage they're at. It looks here probably they wrote left to right and knew enough to go to the next line to begin writing left to right again. So that tells us a lot about all the things they've learned about writing already. This is another example of emergent writing. This student is likely further along the developmental scale, and you can see he has developed a sense of understanding letters and upper and lowercase letters, and possibly has a sense of what words are. This is also an example of emergent writing. It's very similar to the previous example, except that it has been typed with some kind of keyboard. So I'd like you to make sure you send me examples of these types of writing. Even if you have a student who just types away or bangs away on the keyboard and it looks totally meaningless, our instinct is to delete that or not send it along to share with anyone. It's important for students to know that their writing is worth something, it has value, and that you're sharing it with somebody else who will be impressed with their writing. It also does give me lots of information about what stage they're at and what kind of feedback would help them to move forward. When we're supporting students who are at the emergent stage of writing, especially those students who are older, it's super important to motivate them. This method called motivate, model, move out of the way is almost like a sneaky way of getting them to want to write by letting them think that you don't really care whether they write. So you motivate them by choosing an interesting writing tool or topic that they are interested in. Then you model it by participating with the same type of writing and just writing something yourself and talking about what you're writing, and then just encouraging them to write along beside you. And then what you do is you move out of the way. It could be physically, or it could be just keep quiet for a while and see what happens. So you're not going to sit there and say, I need you to write more, get going, get it done before you can do anything fun, blah, blah, blah. You want it to be get them excited, hook them, show them what you're expecting, give them an example, and then just step back and let it rip and see what happens. Here are some tips for supporting emergent writing. The number one tip is actually number one here, and that is really to just allow the time it takes to help students to explore and find their own internal motivation for writing. It's important for the adult support person or parent or whoever's with the students to write along with them and provide that model of writing behaviors and conventions. This could be even peers. If you have brothers or sisters or others in the house who are more advanced in writing, it is very motivating to see other peers writing, and not to compare each other's writing, but just to have writing time where we all sit and work on our journals, or for example, or we're all going to make a list of our favorite foods and then we can pick something for the grocery list. So I'll be providing lots of ideas for context, topics, writing prompts, but make sure the student isn't alone in writing, especially at the beginning, because they need that model to see what writing looks like. And at the same time, number three is to model how we talk about our writing. So this could be simply them watching you while you write down a few words or a sentence and you say them out loud. And they're just watching how the text that they're seeing matches the words that you're saying. For some students, that is a concept that they haven't figured out yet. Listen to what they're telling you about their writing. So they might be talking about it as they're writing, which shows that they're catching on to modeling. You're modeling about talking about writing. And if you can, just write down on the back or make a note to say what the intended meaning is with the writing. So I'm hoping you'll send me an example every now and then you can tell me what the context was, what the topic was, show me the picture you were talking about, or what, a general sense of the conversation, because that helps us to attribute meaning to their writing. And then lastly, but not least, praise their writing. There's no wrong answer in this process. You're always going to show an interest and enthusiasm for what they've written, and then you can ask for more when you think they're ready for the next step. Try to push them a little bit and say, tell me more about that. And anything they give you that's more, then you right away praise that. So we're trying to stretch their growth. So if they started out writing one letter, let's push them to write 2 letters. I wanted to tell you about a few things to avoid during independent writing at this stage. One is the letter outlines, which is a common thing you'll see in schools. The point of doing this is really to perfect the print of your writing, and it is closely related to fine motor skills and how well you can hold and control your pencil. It is not very related to what we're looking for in writing for this stage. And this process is really to give kids a sense of how writing can help them get their thoughts out on paper or whatever their surface happens to be, and get their message across to someone else. So we want to avoid making them think it's that important that they can connect the dots, because they might focus more on that and less on the thinking part of writing. I'd also like to avoid matching or copying during this process. There will be time for shared writing where the adult and student can write together, and they can absolutely copy your examples so that they can get the words across. For independent writing, if they're focused on matching and copying, again, they're just really looking at the shapes of letters, and they're missing that cognitive piece of thinking about writing and thinking about what their thoughts are that they want to get out, and wondering what letters would go with those thoughts to get down on paper. So we want to really encourage exploration more than perfect letters. We'd also like to avoid predictive text technology during this type of writing. That will come later on once they have a pretty good sense of writing that we can understand, at least phonetically. Then they can explore more predictive text. So the kids who are at that stage already, which is past emergent stage, can absolutely make use of the technology, which will speed up their typing. But at this stage, they're going to tend to just pick whatever letter or word pops up and not pay attention to what is the point of those letters. Eventually, these students may be able to sit and write some journal entries without any prompts whatsoever. However, let's be realistic. Chances are, if you say, I'm going to ask you to sit down and write, they will not know what to do. So partly it's going to be you modeling, but also it might be great at the beginning to give them some kind of context. And I will be posting on Google Classroom some ideas for context so that you can give them the variety that they need to see all the different ways and reasons why we might write. But in the meantime, the best or probably the easiest thing to do is to just go online and find some photos, or maybe you have some photos already of people that they know where they can write about what's in the photo. So if you Google writing prompts for kids or visual writing prompts, you'll see photos that have something with enough interest that you can just ask them to write about what they see in the photo, and whatever they write is okay. And we can use that photo to attribute meaning to whatever stage of writing they're at and show them something more that they could do. There are other techniques which I'll share with you, such as sentence starters for that person who maybe can only write one letter. So you can say a sentence and then they are filling in the last word. And so whatever letter they pick, we can give some kind of word that starts with that letter and see if it makes any sense. So there'll be lots of reasons. You might need to show them some examples of different reasons why we would write. So I've listed some there. The last one I gave you there was complaints, because you will have students who will complain and say, I don't want to write. And I have used that example in school where I tricked a student into writing a letter of complaint to the principal, which was all about how he didn't want to write. But by doing that, he was writing. So we start where we need to start. I look forward to seeing everything the students are doing in their writing, and I will plan to make individual feedback videos for each student based on their writing examples. So if you're someone supporting that student, can you please decide how you'd like to send me examples of their writing? The easiest way is often to take a picture of it and then send me the picture and send me a note about what the context was. You can do that by email, or you can add it to Google Classroom, and often your student or someone else in the house will know how to do that. But if you'd like information about how to do that, you can let me know. Whichever is easier for you, as long as I can get some examples now and then so that we can, let's try for once a week to send me an example of what they're doing for writing. If you're still at the exploring stage, just send me a picture of what kind of writing tools they're playing around with. Thanks.